you can learn things one of two ways. You can make mistakes and try to learn from them, or you can listen to the mistakes of others and try to avoid them. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly made many mistakes and learned from them, but I think I'm better than most people at hearing the mistakes of others and go, nah, I don't have to go there.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast with your host, David Mansilla. Today we have with us one of the best persons in the real estate market. It's an honor and privilege to have you with us, Peter Linneman. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me, David.
Excellent, excellent. To have a little bit of background, where do you live, Peter?
So I'm sitting in my apartment about 2 blocks from Independence Hall in Central City, Philadelphia. In fact, the background is a photo I took about 3-4 days ago, just behind Independence Hall, and kind of reminds me of the passing of fall. Wow,
it's gorgeous. If I would have thought that you purchased that image through a website or something. It looks fantastic.
No, I actually took that with my little iPhone, so I'm very happy with that.
That is fantastic. Wonderful. And Peter, what is it that you do for a living?
My wife asked that. And she also asked, why don't you do it better? No, for many years, I'm an economist by training, University of Chicago many years ago, Milton Friedman student many years ago. I was on Wharton's business school faculty at the University of Pennsylvania for 30 couple of years. I retired from the faculty about 10 years ago. Meanwhile, in 1979, I started Linneman Associates, which is a boutique economic finance real estate advisory firm. We also do some investing through various affiliates. We do some opportunity zone investing. If anybody's looking for opportunities, we also do some apartment investings. We focused on long hold, but I also have a number of high wealth and REITs and private equity, et cetera, that I advised for many years. I have a publication called Linneman Letter, which is quarterly. It's a long letter, but it's become kind of an industry standard. I have a book called Real Estate Finance and Investments. It's on its 6th edition, widely used in many companies and universities. This most recent edition is co-authored with former student Bruce Kirsch. And I've served on about 20 public company boards over the years. I'm on 4 public company boards currently, all in the real estate space. And to keep us busy, my wife and I have a charity called Save a Mind Education. It's SAM Elimu. It helps destitute children, supports destitute children, orphans from rural Kenya. We support everything in their life. We've graduated about 140 students since 2003, and we have about 140 children in the pipeline. And we do some other education support. I was a blue-collar kid from a blue-collar family in a blue-collar town, and a Rust Belt town. Now it's a Rust Belt. It wasn't rusty then. It was quite vibrant. Mm-hmm. And my life was totally changed by education and by the people who helped educate me. So we're very committed to helping first-generation students that way.
That is beautiful. And now I know why your wife is asking you, what do you do for a living? Because you do so many things.
I can't do anything well, David. I do a lot of things okay.
Peter, let's go back in time. You were in high school. What motivated you to go into economic school?
Well, it's interesting because as I mentioned, I went to a Catholic high school in Lima, Ohio, Lima Catholic, and my father my father didn't graduate high school. My mother graduated high school, and he was a laborer. He was a worker, and he always thought guys like us, you got to become one of them. He didn't even really understand what that meant. So he understood college football and college basketball, but he didn't really understand the rest of the college. So I went to university, put myself through university. And while there, interestingly, in 3 weeks or on New Year's Eve, I go to the 100th birthday party of the woman who changed my life. She was the only woman in her class in 1946 at Northwestern getting an MBA. And she was my economics professor. We became dear, dear friends, really since 1969. And she opened my eyes that I had some talent in economics, that economics was an interesting area, economics and finance. And as I finished my university, she sort of said, you ought to go get a PhD in economics. And I hadn't, other than I didn't know, blue collar kid, right?
Right.
And I went to the University of Chicago, and then I had 3 Nobel Prize winners on my thesis committee, and knew a number of others, and so it was it was like most things in life. You didn't see it coming until you're well down the river. But it was a great journey. And that's kind of been my life in every way.
Wow. Like you're being led by a higher intelligence since a young kid.
Well, yeah, I mean, and this woman, I should give her a shout out for anybody who knows her, Lucille Ford. She'll be 100 years old on New Year's Eve, and we'll be at her birthday party. Wow. And she changed many people's lives. She's one of those people. And, you're blessed to have people like that come into your life. And I've had others. You're just blessed to have those kind of people. And it was my good fortune. I tell young people that it's my good fortune that I encountered her or Milton Friedman or, business, Sam Zell or whoever. It was my good luck to encounter them. It was my hard work and intelligence to use that opportunity. I don't mean misuse. I mean to really grow with it. And as you know, you have to have your eyes open when opportunities arise and know how to work hard and make it work.
Amazing. And the fact that you had a mentor in such an early stage in your life, and it's so important, right? Because through mentors is that we actually grow.
Think about it. Since 1969, I'm 70 years old. Wow. To have this person, when her husband, before her husband died about 15 years ago, we traveled together. I took her to Antarctica, I took her to Germany, I took her to India, and so forth. And if you saw a movie of it, you'd say this doesn't happen, but it does happen. And there's many of these in life. You know that. I'm sure there's people in your life that way.
Of course it is. Yes, it's, I was reading a book, and the book says that we are standing in the shoulders of giants, and it's the people around us that came before us that laid the path for us to grow, right? And it's understanding that that's what it's all about. Like you can actually try to figure out things your own way, or you can find a mentor that has done what you want to do and skip 10 years of your life.
Well, it's an interesting comment, because sometimes young people, I have many students. We have these students in Kenya. I have young people who've worked for me and so forth, because I am a mentor to a number of people, and they'll say, what was one of the keys of your success, as limited as it is? And it's what you said. One, I understood that I could stand on some giant shoulders, right? And I understood they were giants and get on them. And the second thing was, this will sound strange, you can learn things one of two ways. You can make mistakes and try to learn from them, or you can listen to the mistakes of others and try to avoid them. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly made many mistakes and learned from them, but I think I'm better than most people at hearing the mistakes of others and go, nah, I don't have to go there. I'll take my father. My father, Pearl Harbor happens. He drops out of high school. Next thing you know, he's in the South Pacific for the rest of the war in the Marines, and smoked until he died at 49. And as he would be doing this, he'd say, never smoke, never smoke, never smoke, And I had the choice. I could either smoke and then try to give it up, or just don't start, and that's a good little example of sometimes just listen to the mistake of others. If somebody is smoking and saying, don't start, that's a good lesson.
But coming from a financially struggling background, do you have any problems paying for university once you got accepted?
Well, I started working when I was 12. I know that sounds crazy to people today, but I had a newspaper route. I would work about 12 to 25 hours a week. This was a wonderful time of year because you got tips,
Right.
when you went out and collected for your papers. I put myself through a little Catholic high school, and I put myself through university, and I got loans, and I got some scholarships, and I was very fortunate in graduate school to win some scholarships. And but yeah, I worked. When I was in university, I'd work about 25 hours a week. And it's funny, you're a lot younger than me. My summer job in college for 4 years, my summer job was driving spikes on the B&O Railroad. Monopoly, there's a thing called B&O.
Right.
I worked for the B&O Railroad as a trackman in the summer. A lot of college students did back then, driving spikes. And you go, why'd you do that? Because I wanted to go to university. And that's what I did for three months. And today, kids, if you told a college kid, what you should do this summer is work in a factory or work on the railroad, or they would think you're crazy. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I learned why I was going to school, quite honestly. I learned another valuable lesson. Again, at the railroad, I learned lots of workers are doing it because they want their family to eat, and they want their family to have clothes, and they want their family to have a house. Most of the people who worked at the railroad, they were legit, but it wasn't a career, it was a job. And they didn't want responsibility. And if you wanted responsibility, you had a rare skill. So you want responsibility. I'm willing to bet if I go back and if I knew you when you were 16, you wanted responsibility.
For sure.
I wanted responsibility. Nobody would give it to us, right? That was our problem. That's why I love my newspaper route. I was responsible, And if you like responsibility, what a gift, because most people don't want responsibility. And so people like you, people like me, others, one of our great gifts is we're willing to take responsibility.
It's completely true. And, that's why I actually made this podcast. It's called Break Free, because I see so many younger people with so many ideas, and they want to break out and they want to create their own business, or, even people wanting to go to university, and they always have an excuse. Oh, I can do it. I don't have the money. I come from such a poor background. And then I meet people like you that, you made the way. So if you really decide to do something, there is always a way to get it done. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, though.
I have 4 siblings. One has passed away. Only one of my 4 siblings went to university. I mean, so it wasn't like it was expected in my area. I always expected it of me, but it wasn't like it was expected. My mom, who passed away about 2 years ago at 96, my mother's crowning achievement in my career was I graduated high school. Right? And to me, I went to high school. I mean, it was part of my life, but it's hardly a crowning achievement. Now, it's not to say my mother wasn't proud of other things I did, but it shows what success was in her framework of life, that he made it through high school and graduated, And I suspect there's a lot of people listening to this that fall into that same boat. And you just have to, and I think your point about finding a mentor, find a mentor. But it's funny, you mentioned mentors. I've had a lot of people who I have been a mentor to over my life. I'm sure you have as well. One of the predictors who I will not end up being a mentor for is if somebody you don't know says, I want you to be my mentor. Because that's not how it works. I mean, you would agree, and I'm sure you had that same experience where somebody comes up and says, it would be my mentor. And you go, well, that's not how it works. You develop, you have to come to know the person, you have to understand the person, their rhythm, and so forth. So, yeah, it's not like buying a bottle of soda, right? Getting a mentor is a commitment. It goes slowly. And then after 4 years, you go, or 7 years, you go, oh yeah, I learned a lot. And I can turn to them in moments of when I want direction and friendship and so forth. I suspect you've had the same experience.
Exactly. And you know what it is if you look at all the mentors that I had in my life, everything started by me trying to help them.
Yes.
And then I realized, oh my God, this person knows so much more, and the relationship started to grow. And you're right. Like, for example, the person that is 90% responsible for me breaking out of my corporate job, we ended up working together. We still work together, right? But we met together doing one of my last jobs for the largest telecommunications company in Canada, and I started helping him with software that he needed he was doing networking. And then he said, you play squash. And then we started playing squash. We became good friends. And then he was telling me all about business and how I could structure my life into a consulting company instead of being a full-time employee. And he showed me all the differences. And I wanted to do this with all my heart. And then when I finally took the leap of faith, he was there to support me, and he started giving me work. He still gives me work. And this happened 25 years ago.
Yeah, no, your story, the specifics are different, but the outline is identical. And if you said I've had 5 or 10 real mentors, not just teachers, but real mentors in life and business, in economic and academia, all of them fit your description of how it happened. And it's genuine. You know what it is? It's genuine. It's not an artificial. If you try to make a mentorship artificial, it can help, but it's not the real deal.
Yes. And in fact, when I reached a certain level, I really wanted to give back. So I started looking for venues on where I could actually teach what I know. And I got into this organization supported by the government, where they will actually assign you entrepreneurs that were struggling. And I did it for a number of years, but I realized that because people were assigned to me, I got like 10 people assigned, only one took advantage of my advices.
So
only
here's I'll give you the parallel. I don't want to make the whole conversation about this. So I mentioned Sam Elimu, the Save a Mind education. So we have all these young children, all these students ranging, I think our youngest is about 8. And then we have a couple even in graduate school. And we have some alums. We have some terrific alums. And we are right now instituting a mentor program where one of the graduates does with the students. And my biggest concern is what you just described. Namely, I can assign somebody to somebody, but that doesn't mean it'll end up really being a mentor. It's better than not doing that, right? At least it gives a chance. But it's my biggest concern about our mentor effort is it's not quite how it happens. So we'll see how my effort goes that way.
So you have a doctorate in economics. How do you how do you get attracted to the real estate market?
This is another great story of what I say, life isn't linear. It sounds like your life has not been linear.
Oh, no, not at all.
Young people think that you start here and you end here and everything in between is a straight line with them. Okay, so I become a university professor. My first 7 or 8 years, or 8 years of it, I'm doing what I would say general economics, applied statistics, econometrics, and finance, right? Just kind of nothing specialized. I was publishing. I had a consulting business, Linneman Associates, that was mostly doing advising to Michelin tire and paper companies and copper companies and water heater companies, things like that, not real estate, right? These were what we would call old line manufacturing kind of companies, right? And in 1985, I'm a tenured faculty and so forth. A wonderful dean, Russ Palmer, was in his second year of being a dean, and he came to me and he said, would you do me a favor? Look at what we're doing here at Wharton in real estate, because I can't decide whether to get rid of it or to grow it, because it's a disgrace what we've got, but we're Wharton, we ought to be able to do something good, but approach it like you'd approach a consulting contract. He didn't pay me. So I looked at it and I came back after studying and said, look, it's a field that's going to professionalize over the next 35 years. It's massively under-professionalized. This is very similar to what banking and investment banking was 15 years earlier than then, that rapidly professionalized. We're in the professionalization business. We ought to be in it, but what we've got is an absolute disaster. And you've got to do it, and there's interesting questions. So yeah, you ought to keep it, but you got to get rid of what you got, start over. Thank you very much. Nice talking to you, Russ. And I'm going to go back and do my stuff. So about 4 months later, he came to me and said, well, why don't you do it? So I don't know anything about it. I mean, I only know the little research I did. I don't know anything about it. He said, don't worry, you'll figure that out. So I took it on as an assignment, and back to the mentors. I knew I needed help. So I reached out to a number of people in the industry that I didn't know. But if you got to know one of them and they're a good spirit, you could get introduced to another. So Alfred Taubman, rest his soul, was the kind of grandfather of the modern shopping center, becomes the leader of this effort, was not an alum, was the real deal in the industry, was an amazing man. He's got a great autobiography called Threshold Resistance, about 10 years old. And I'm in it, but my name's misspelled, just so, it's kind of, I'm good enough to make his autobiography, but not good enough to have my name spelled right. And anyway, he and a bunch of other guys in the industry were very kind to me and taught me the business and taught me the industry and taught what we ought to be teaching. And we really built a program. And so who would have guessed? So now it fit, knowing some things about labor economics and some things about macroeconomics and finance. It all kind of came together, but who would have guessed? But that's how it was. It was this administrative effort. But again, if I not gotten these amazing people who were very kind, and they wanted to professionalize their business. That's what they wanted. And Wharton and I became a conduit. Now, since then, many programs around the world have knowingly or unknowingly copied and improved in their own ways, like everything in life. Nobody knows who invented the pencil, right? Everybody's copied it and improved it over the years. But that's how I got into it. And and I'm a good student. That's another thing. I know how to learn. I really do. I know how to, it's hard to learn, and I know you got to work at it. And so I just went to work and learned everything I could from the best people I could find. And here I am in, whatever, that was 1985. So what's that, 36 years later? And I'm supposed to know a little bit about it, but as you know, the more you learn, you realize the less you know. But that's how I got into it.
Isn't it incredible that you were one of the founders of professional real estate? Because I guess before then, if Wharton didn't know what they were doing, nobody knew what they were doing.
There were some, there were some organizations that were fairly professional. And all I mean by, you have been in business, fairly professional, in that these are the things you know as a professional. This is how you conduct yourself. For example, though, in 1990, lots of the names in real estate didn't know what a balance sheet was. They didn't know what cash flow. I mean, they didn't even keep track of it that way. And you go, really? And the notion of understanding what's going on in the economy, only a very few do. Now, all of them, if you go to Blackstone and Angelo Gordon and all the major Hines, and all of them have tremendous people who do all the same things you'd find in any other great firm in any other great industry. But that wasn't true then. So no one, I'm not looking for praise. When I die, no one will know that I was kind of one of the guys, not the only one, but with some other, that actually invented the pencil. I was one of the guys that began the professionalization. And so my writings and book and client work and so forth has had a lot of impact on that.
That's fantastic. Now, being a professor at university, what motivated you to create your consulting firm?
Boredom. University life is very rewarding for the mind. And I always loved it. I loved two other parts. I love the fact of, everybody talks about the great students, and I can tell you about my great students, and many of my great students are famous. They would have succeeded without me. Now, I'd like to believe I helped them a little bit, but the ones I really enjoyed. Now, remember, I'm teaching at Wharton, so I'm not teaching dumb kids, right? I'm not, but I enjoyed seeing the lazy kid, the kid who was getting almost nothing out of their capabilities and grabbing them, exciting them, turning them on, and giving them a glimpse of what they can do. That was always exciting to me. I like that. The other thing I like doing, remember I said, I'm good at learning. So the normal faculty member, especially these days, they want one course. That's the only course they want to teach, and they want to teach that for 20 years because they don't want to learn new stuff. I probably did 20 different courses over the course of my career. Macroeconomics, econometrics, public policy, real estate development, international, and I could go on and on. Why? Because it meant I had to really learn it. Not just know it, but really learn it. And when you did a course on real estate finance and a course on international real estate, and then you did another course on real estate development, you started to see how they fit, right? And how, and I love that part of it. I really did love that part of it. But there is a boring part of university life. And the boring part is you basically do the same thing every day. I had a Nobel Prize winner, George Stigler, who was very kind to me at Chicago and was like a grandfather to me. And when I was a graduate student, he said, you're not going to be the happiest in academia all your life because your attention span is too short. You want to do a lot of things. And in academia, it's your class and you do it again. It's your paper or book, you do it again. Or you go into administration. And he says, I just don't see it that way. You want to do many other things. Now, he understood me better than I understood myself, because what I loved about the business side was a new challenge, a new client, a new problem, a new situation. And that really stimulated. I'll tell you how I got my first two consulting contracts, though. It's 1979. And you remember these things. I'm sure you could tell me yours as well. 1979, and I got a call from the number 3 executive at what was Scott Paper, now gone, but at that time was the 3rd largest paper manufacturer in the United States. And I got a call, and he says, I'm told you're a bright young guy, and we should hire you as a consultant. Do you want to work for us? Literally, he said his name. I knew who Scott Paper was. And he says, would you like to work for us? And I'm 27 years old or something like that. And I said, sure. Important lesson, say sure, right? Because I know they're legitimate. They're not immoral or illegal or something. And I had no idea what I was going to do, but I figured I'd figure it out. And then he says to me, well, what do you charge? No idea. And I said, $50 an hour, $50. He said, fine. I should have asked for 60, you know, but I realized you'll get it in the end. And a week later, unrelated, I got a call from Michelin Tire. And Michelin Tire, the number 2 guy there, said, US, Michelin US, says, you know, I understand you're a bright young guy. We should hire you as a consultant. Not on real estate, by the way, just in general economic strategy, business, finance. And I said, okay. And they said, how much? And I said, 50, because now I knew $50 an hour. Well, I subsequently found out that they called like you, somebody they really should have called, and you weren't available. You were busy, right? You didn't have the bandwidth. And then they asked, and I'm sure you've had this happen, well, do you have anybody to suggest? And I had done something, I found out subsequently who it was, and I had impressed somebody. And they said, you ought to call him. He's a bright young guy. Lessons: say yes. Don't worry about what you're paid in the beginning, because if you're any good, you're going to more than make it up later.
Yes.
And the third is, if you do good work, somebody's going to notice, and sooner or later, an opportunity is going to arise. And you got to take advantage of it. I think I did good work. I worked for both of them for about a decade, and consulting. And then other clients just kind of came over the years. But it's funny, you reflect back on that. Those are lessons, right? Say yes rather than no. Grow. Take the challenge. Don't worry about what you're being paid in the beginning. Worry more about what you're going to be paid in the end, right? Yes. And do good. If I had not done good work in an unrelated area, this person, when they were called, would have never thought of me. And that these companies would have never called me.
Incredible. And that talks about commitment and integrity, right?
Yeah.
And also, like, the word of mouth. It's funny that you mentioned that, because in my company, I started kind of like that. After I left my last job, I always did at least 20% more of what my job demanded. So I was never fired. The only person that fired me in my life was my brother, but it's because his company was in trouble. So I was just graduating in computer science, because I also worked through my school. And he said, you are the only one that has a title that can get a job in a second. So let's go.
I've never been fired. Maybe I should have been. I don't know. I'll tell you one other thing, and I'd be curious of your reaction. And again, I'm older than you, so I go back to a different era. You know, I had jobs mopping floors. I had job when I'm in university. I told you I'm driving spikes, but also I was working in university, and I was, you know, mopping floors and cleaning toilets and whatever. And I find it interesting. People will say, well, that job's beneath me, especially when you're young, especially when you're like in college. I never found a job beneath me. I just never did. And if I was going to clean toilets, people think I'm joking. I wanted it to be the cleanest toilet ever.
Yes.
You know, if I wrapped a newspaper as a 12-year-old boy, I wanted it to be the best wrapped newspaper ever. Now, I'm not saying I always succeeded. I'm not saying there weren't days that I probably wasn't as good an employee as I should have been, but I tried mostly. But this notion, I suspect you see it in a lot of young people, this job is beneath me.
Yeah.
You know, this job is, by the way, I'm not going to make cleaning toilets. You know, it's a lower entry than I should take. And my comment always, I'd be curious on yours. My comment is always, take it. If they're a legitimate company and good people, take it and prove to them it's beneath you. Because there's a shortage of talent out there that can prove they're competent and capable of producing. You'll be given opportunity, maybe not the first day, but you have a similar experience?
Yeah, and for sure. I was blessed though, because I did military school for 2 years, and they teach you how to be humble the hard way. So they will take us, and they will make us clean toilets, but also they will take us on the streets and pick up garbage. And you know, I come from a middle-class family, and for me, that was like you were saying, right? That was not the type of work I was supposed to do. But then after going through the experience, I realized that it gave me humbleness and appreciation for anything that you can add value in life to, even if it's picking up garbage or cleaning toilets, right?
And the other thing I mentioned, the railroad, and that those are real people who do those jobs. They're good people who do those jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be also bad people, but just because they're doing that job doesn't mean they're not a real person with real hopes and joys and loves. And, they're real people. They're not them. They're not them. They're us. And that was always important. I'll tell you a story. I got to know, in 1994, 1995, I was chairman, very complex story, that I become chairman of Rockefeller Center. And I was succeeded by, like 5 years earlier, David Rockefeller. Now, David Rockefeller was an amazing man, and he was the grandson of John David Rockefeller, who by any standard was possibly the richest man in his time ever, right? By his time. And people claim he would be richer than Bezos in an apple, who knows? Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So David Rockefeller, Standard Oil of Ohio, et cetera. So and Rockefeller Center. So I become chairman of Rockefeller Center, and I'm talking to David one day. And David was, if you were going to be the richest man in the world and you hoped your grandson would grow up to be, you would hope they'd grow up to be David Rockefeller, humble and kind and smart and helpful and modest and all those things. And I got to know him, and I said, David, you and I have three things in common. One, we both went to the University of Chicago and got a PhD in economics. Granted, your grandfather founded the university and was their major donor. And I put myself through. I said, second, my father and your father worked for Standard Oil of Ohio. Granted, mine was a laborer and yours was the principal shareholder and chairman. And I said, third is we were both chairman of Rockefeller Center at one point in history. Granted, your father built it and owned it at one point. And David, I'll never forget, he was very sweet. And he said, isn't this an amazing country? Mm-hmm. And he meant it. He meant it in a very genuine way. Isn't this an amazing country? And it captured it all in a little simple way of, I was sitting with David Rockefeller. Who would have guessed a kid from Lima, Ohio would sit with David Rockefeller?
I think the problem comes from your parenting and your experience that you have as a child, because the contrast that you gave me is fantastic, right? You have this person that was born in riches and still was humble and super adding value to society, right?
Huge.
And then somebody like you, right, that comes from a humble background and ended up at the same level. It's beautiful.
Well,
right?
He was, to be clear, his net worth was a lot higher than mine, but accepted fully as an equal. Accepted fully as an equal, right?
Exactly.
And that's and that's, by the way, I mean, is life completely fair? And do some people come from more harmful, difficult situations? Of course. I mean, my Kenya kids, my Kenya kids admire me, okay? What they don't get is I admire them more, because some of them, not all of them, some of them, had they been born in the United States when I was born, with the support network I had, remember I have a lot of orphans in my program, in the support network I had and given the opportunity, some of them would have become me or better or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't think I could have been them. I don't know that I'm that strong. I don't know that if my mother and my father and my grandmother and my aunt and everybody died of AIDS within a 2-year period when I'm 5 years old, and I'm in a dirt village and I've never had shoes, and I have one dress, and I can't go to school because you have to pay fees to go to school. I can't even go to the public school because you have to pay a fee at school. I don't know if I could have survived. Mm-hmm. And what I keep telling them is I learn as much from them as they do from me. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a lot I can teach them. Don't misunderstand, but people don't understand how blessed we are today in this country versus when I was born. I'll give you one number. When I was born, I'm doing this from memory. I was looking at it recently. A male had a life expectancy in the United States of 64 years. Think about that. Now I'm 70, almost 71, and 75% of the people born in the United States that year are still alive. Well, I happen to be born in an era where we didn't have World War II. My father had to wade ashore at these crazy places and have people shoot at him. I didn't have to do that. I know people have had to do that during my lifetime. I didn't have to. And you just go, wow. And I was born in a family that was like, Dostoevsky, all families are dysfunctional. They're just dysfunctional in their own way. I mean, mm-hmm. My family was one of those families. I'm sure everybody's family is one of those families, right? Anyway, yeah.
At the end of the day, after, I've been 50 years in this beautiful world, and I have come to realize that material wealth is just more zeros in a bank account or more real estate property or more of whatever. But in the core, we're all the same.
So I'll give you
our core, we're all the same, right?
Give you 2 comments. First of all, your next 20 years are going to be better than your last 50.
Yes.
I'm serious. As long as who knows if you have a terrible health issue or something, but by and large, you're going to find that your next 20 years are better than your last 20 years because you know yourself better, you know what you're capable of, and so forth. And that's an important thing. And the other thing is that it's not that hard to do good. Do good. Do good to your children. Do good to your coworkers. By the way, I'm not saying become Sister Teresa. In fact, Monday, I was talking to a very close former student of mine from about, 12, 13, 14 years ago. Time flies. More than that, 18 years ago, now that I think about it. And he said, we were talking about a deal we're doing together, right? So it was a totally different context. And he says, you said a lot of things in class that stuck with me, but one of the things I've never forgotten, this was this last Monday, he said this, about a class 18 years ago. He said, one of the things that I never forgot was on the last day of the class, you said almost exactly what you said, which is you can be miserable rich, you can be miserable poor, you can be productive rich, you can be productive poor. You got to find your way to love, be loved, and be productive. And by the way, I got that from my 100-year-old friend, the love, be loved, and productive. And he said, you then said that you don't want to live in a world where people view Sister Teresa as a failure because she doesn't have money. Exactly. And he says, that hit me. That really hit me. I don't want to live in a world where because she isn't economically rich, someone like Sister Teresa is a failure? Really? I mean, that makes no sense. And he says it really put a lot in context. Now, he's done quite well in business. It's not like he went off and went to a cloister or something, right? The point was there's more, right?
It's all about fulfillment. If you're fulfilled, brother, that's what life is about. Yeah. Like you were saying, how to love, how to be loved, and how to be productive. This is the game of life. But so we confuse it, right? With richness. And yes, I'm not saying no, like I am blessed economically, right? But that's not the point.
And my parents struggled. They were never really economically successful, but they loved, they were loved, they were productive. Break free is a great phrase. In a funny way, the goal is love, be productive, be independent, not be isolated, right? You're not suggesting anybody should be isolated, but break free and find yourself and be independent. But my 100-year-old, I stole that, she knows I stole it, but I think it really does capture it, right? Love, be loved, and be productive. And by the way, she doesn't mean be productive in the sense of make a lot of money. Sister Teresa was very productive in what she did.
Yeah.
The school teacher, who's a great school teacher, in what they do, a parent in what they do with their children. Be productive.
Yes. Peter, thank you so much for your wonderful time. I am so blessed to have you as a guest in this podcast. One last question before we go.
Okay.
If you had access to a billboard in the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Love, be loved, and be productive.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
What else is there to say other than that?
Yes. Incredible.
And in the small print, I'd say watch your podcast, Break Free.
Thank you.
But that would be the small print down at the bottom, not the big print.
Peter, if people want to find more about you or how they can invest in the real estate opportunities that you have, how will they find you?
So come to Linneman Associates, Linneman Associates, and you'll see what we do. You'll see our investment platforms. You'll see our charitable platform. You'll see our consulting platform, our publication platforms, and you'll see some speeches I've given and podcasts and so forth. And there might even be a photo of me. I mean, wouldn't that be exciting? With a photo of me, right? So anyway.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. My true appreciation on behalf of my audience. I know that they're going to get so blessed by your wisdom because I got blessed already.
Well, if I taught anybody one thing, it was worth my time. If I taught one person that is one thing I would say. One of the things I learned teaching is you aren't going to reach all the people. You're not going to reach all of them. If you can reach one of them, that's a successful day. So hopefully we both had a successful day.
Yes, we have. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of the day, and I'll see you around.
Thank you, David.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.